Hey everyone, and welcome to our Wednesday edition of Found Friday. I'm your host, Karen Skates, and with me today is Erin O'Brien, our COO. How you doing, Erin?
Doing good.
Good. As you may know, we recently started a series of best practices episodes focusing on how to get the most out of your marketing and SEO efforts and actually move the needle forward to meet overall corporate goals. However, we realize that it's not always possible to reach that pinnacle of best practices, especially if you have a small team or an organization that makes it hard to do it all and do it perfectly. It actually happens a lot. So to help alleviate that feeling of being overwhelmed that prompts people to just throw in the towel, we thought we'd pause and take an episode to talk about some creative solutions and our best hacks for making the resources you have work best for you. So let's start with content marketing. There are so many moving pieces now associated with this task that some people in smaller organizations have just given up and declared, I can't do it alone. So what advice would you give to those folks?
It's really funny because in my opinion, one of the best things about content marketing is that you can do it alone. At its basic, really core point, content marketing is just about creating content that your audience wants. So something unique, something engaging, informative, or something that solves a problem. And then just making sure that they can find it. I realize that I'm probably oversimplifying a little bit. And people are like, oh, well, that sounds easy. But I mean, really, that's what we're talking about. Everybody is trying to do. When you're talking about the content from an organic traffic perspective, this means following good SEO practices, which have really morphed over the last couple of years to reward good content and steer clear of spammy practices and spammy content. When it comes to doing it alone, I think that this is really a matter of figuring out what works for your audience and how to leverage any piece of content that you create to be the most effective. The Found Friday series we do is actually a really great example of this. When I first started at Metrics, I had to figure out, I had an army of one myself to do marketing. And on top of being responsible for, content creation, I was responsible for a variety of other things. So there wasn't this easy, oh, I can just create some content and it'll work perfectly mentality. So had to create content on a regular basis to stay engaged with the audience. That was really daunting. So the Found Friday series has really allowed me to have a conversation with either Ray or someone in the community that was like a live event and could be really topical, but the conversation itself stayed casual. And then what was great was afterward, I had not only a live event that folks could attend, I had a video that we could share. I could create a blog post from the video, and I could even sometimes create like a SlideShare presentation or a white paper or a best practices page from it, like all from this one thing that was, like a 30-minute conversation once a week. And that became, 3 or 4 pieces of content. And that gave me a lot of leverage. And because it was topical each week, it meant I was kind of staying current to what people were talking about and had asked for.
I think that the executive team in an enterprise or larger organizations already know the value of data, but those in smaller organizations may not see gathering lots of SEO data as a cost-effective use of money and resources. And most marketers are really needing that data to help them move things forward. So how can marketers start to prove the importance of SEO and organic search data to overall marketing?
Well, I mean, as much as I hate to say it, I really hope you're wrong. Like, I actually hope most people see organic data as being really useful. One of the biggest reasons organic traffic and by extension, content marketing and SEO practices are so valuable is because it's showing you what your audience is really looking for and where what you're doing is actually best matching their needs. So for example, if you got a list of keywords that are, based on features, and your audience really seems to gravitate towards this one keyword and feature all the time, that may point to either, product decisions, like about where you should be building, how you should be promoting things, what people seem to really be gravitating toward. And it's also going to show you, maybe where you are having a disconnect. So it could be anything from like you're not talking about it correctly, or you're not promoting it well, or you've just created content that's kind of bleh around those particular features. There's so much information that you're able to gather from organic, because you're not paying, right? Like, you're not forcing people to go there. And it also keeps working even when you're not paying for it, right? Like, that's one of the things that we always say about paid traffic, is that the second you stop paying for it, it stops doing anything for you. So creating this kind of really good content that's evergreen, I would rather spend my time and money creating one or two really great pieces of evergreen content that are constantly seen as a resource for my industry than I would creating a lot of little things that are kind of just topical, that are flash in the pan. Oh, a few people went to them, or, a couple hundred people went there, and then it's gone a week or two later because, like, I was just pushing advertising to it. And I think that, that's something that executives hopefully uh, do find interesting, is because it has to do with bottom line. It has to do with revenue, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, let's break down this idea of data gathering and reporting and using it to inform decisions. If you can't have it all, what are the bare bones analytics you need to get the job done?
Oh man, so it's funny. I think I'll talk a little bit about not just like the bare bones analytics, but like the bare bones things that you can do that I think are really important, because that's what you would be gathering analytics on. So I think that the first thing you really need is a list of keywords that you're targeting, broken out into like what you want to be able to measure and how your company is set up. So that may be things like products, features, campaigns, geographies, different items like that. And that's going to be how you measure like your content effectiveness. And it's also it's really the backbone of SEO. So the next thing you're going to need to know is which keyword and content are pairing up in ranking, so that you know that for each of your targeted keywords, which piece of content is the best match. So, let's say that, I'm talking about a feature of a widget. What I need to know is, when I am looking about that feature of the widget, what of all the content that I've created is actually the most findable by my audience. So, you're going to want to know kind of from there, uh, what your ranking for each one of these pieces of content is and how you can improve it. So like, if you're not on the first page, it's time to consider kind of what's really happening. The first thing is, are you really targeting the right keywords? And I think one of the things that we always talk about in our keyword best practices conversations is, keywords don't need to be a word or like a really general word. It can be a super specific phrase. It can be, like a question. Keywords can be, entire sentences. So kind of like filter down in there and see if you can get more specific. The other thing you can think of is, beyond whether or not you're targeting the right keywords is, do you need to look around and see what content is ranking correctly? So if you're trying to promote, like, let's say, a landing page all the time, but a blog post or a video, seems to, like, blog posts and videos seem to be how audiences are consuming content in the top 5 spots, then consider, maybe I should take this landing page and turn it into some other type of content that might be better. And I think the last part of this is, not just improvements at the, content creation level, but is your content actually structured correctly? And so this is where kind of some more traditional SEO practices can be really helpful. Like, have you actually ensured that all of the elements within the page are optimized to be found? And sometimes that can make a really big difference, especially when we're talking about kind of like fractions of differences between content in ranking. So sometimes just doing those structural changes will give you a boost you need.
In small organizations, 1 or 2 people might be doing it all, from marketing to advertising to sales to PR, and maybe some of the SEO. So what can you tell those people about cutting through the clutter and getting down to what will make the most difference in the time they have?
This is always a tough one for me, because I think that it's, people say it's easier said than done. And like, obviously it's a lot easier to say almost anything than it is to really do it, right? For me, understanding what your audience is looking for, how you're currently doing it well, and how other people might be doing it better is the backbone of a lot of things, right? It's going to not only lead to better content marketing practices, it's going to lead to better advertising. It's going to mean that when you do PR, you know how to message and talk about things, because you know what messaging strategies work better and what your audience is already discussing and how they're discussing it. To me, this is the fundamental thing that you can do that will affect everything and will inform more strategic practices across all of your efforts. And it'll also probably save you a lot of time, right? Because if you can just discard certain things maybe a little bit that like, okay, that messaging strategy really doesn't seem to resonate with anybody, but people really seem to be gravitating towards this one particular topic. So then I'm going to focus creating content around that. I'm going to see if there's like a way to leverage that from a PR standpoint, or I'm going to use that to do my, Google AdWords campaign or Facebook ads or whatever I'm doing, right? And if you are like a one-man or two-person army, then being able to focus in on the stuff that really works and maximize it should be at the top of your list, because you obviously don't have infinite time and resources to do that stuff. So I think that, what is your audience already really looking at, and like what keywords are generating what keywords and content are actually performing the best? I mean, we have something called like a keyword activity chart, and it's at the bottom of the homepage of like your site dashboard. And it's funny because when I show people the product, I always go back and I'm like, this is at the bottom of the page, but it's actually super important. Like, you really want to look at it's on the front page for a reason. And one of the reasons I like the keyword activity chart so much is it tells you the keywords that are getting the most improvement in ranking for your keywords that week. And like, we'll show not just your content and keywords that are improving, but we'll show your competitors' content that's improving the most for your targeted keywords. So you can see like, what if a competitor created some content around something that I care a lot about that's actually raising a lot? Like, what did they do right? Like, because obviously they're really resonating with the audience that we share. So yeah, like, I think that what's working for your audience in terms of both keywords and content, what's working for your competitors that you could be taking some best practices from, and then how can you take that messaging and content and spread it around, because obviously like that's going to maximize time.
Right. And using those same messages then throughout all of your efforts also maximizes your, everything, your time and your impact. So, I recently read something that's someone thought that using SEO to get a few hundred extra visitors to a site was a waste of time. And when I read it, I thought that's clearly an enterprise mentality, because most small businesses would love to welcome a couple hundred new visits. So how can those organizations use SEO data to help make that happen?
I feel like that's not an enterprise mentality, that's an idiot mentality. And the reason I say that is because if you're truly an enterprise business, like let's say you sell enterprise software or something, we're talking about something that costs like $100,000 a year. A few hundred or even a few of the right visitors can mean the difference in thousands and thousands of dollars. I always say this, like, eyeballs are really important when we're talking about, overall awareness and things. But at its core, when we're talking about like real engagement with things and getting there, it's less about quantity and more about accuracy, right? Like, if I shoot 10,000 arrows towards a target and they all land somewhere in the general vicinity of it, and you're like, oh, like, look at all these arrows that are like near this target. No. I care about the few that are actually inside the target and close to the bullseye, because like what the bullseye is that's the sale, that's the conversion, that's the thing, right? So for a lot of folks, it's like, I would rather, this is when we talk about target keyword practices, right? And we talked a lot about this in the last kind of series of videos, which was one of the reasons you want to do keyword grouping, and one of the reasons you want to pay attention to creating more specific keywords as opposed to broad keywords, is because while the more specific stuff may have a smaller search volume, it's likely going to convert better because you are honing in on the best possible audience and creating a piece of content that answers a very specific need. And this is where I would say that smaller teams have a really great opportunity, because, you can make the case to your executives or to your management or to whoever that, like, look, yes, we may get lower traffic numbers, but we will have a much more highly engaged audience because we are going to talk to them about solving a super specific problem that they have. And like, everybody should just be honest. Like if you are a, teeny tiny company, you're not going to compete with the big behemoths anyway in traffic or in volume metrics. So like just give up the ghost, right? Like stop chasing that down and compete on conversions.
And I think it's just frustrating that as you're reading articles or you're going through the internet and you're looking up information about content marketing and SEO, and being told over and over again, if you're not doing everything, if you're not doing it perfectly, you're wasting your time. And I think sometimes people need to be able to show success with the budget, the personnel, and the bandwidth that they already have. So what do you think about this all or nothing mentality?
Well, so I'm definitely a proponent of like, don't do something if you can't do it well, but there's a difference between doing something well and doing the entirety of something, right? So I think that this is kind of like the same thing that I talk about when people, talk about exercise or whatever, is like, oh, well, I can't go to the gym for a full hour. So I'm not going to go at all. And I'm like, if you would just get up for 10 minutes, like it's going to make a difference. So, and you have to start somewhere, right? So the idea of, starting with the things that you can do and showing wins and then kind of growing from there is really important. And I know that this conversation actually stemmed from a release that we did a couple weeks ago around kind of custom reporting offerings, which was like, one of the things that we hear a lot is the platform is really, really big and has tons of data. And so because of that, like we can't leverage the whole platform, but we want some of this information. But like, because we can't leverage the whole platform, we don't want to pay for it. And like, we totally understand that because, we're a startup and we've been there. And in a lot of cases, we still are there. So one of the responses about the release from someone was like, oh, well, do you really need to do this? Because like, if you can't do the whole thing, then it's just like not worth it. We don't believe in that, which was kind of like the genesis of the release, right? Which is, it is good to have good data and good insights for a variety of reasons. And this should be accessible to everyone. And not only should it be accessible to everyone, but that just because you can't do the whole huge ecosystem doesn't mean you should just give up and be like, well, I can't do it all, so I'm going to do none. That'd be like saying, I don't want to participate in social media because I can't manage Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, Vine, YouTube, like all these things. Well, you know what? Start somewhere, like start with what works best. Be like, okay, maybe there's a lot of engagement for my audience on Quora or on LinkedIn or on Facebook. I'm just going to start with that and I'm going to get the ball rolling. And as I find more time and bandwidth, or as I prove the efficacy of that channel, maybe I'll get more resources, to be able to do these things. So you really have to start, somewhere. Very few businesses, I actually think, start with the all mentality.
Well, and the other thing is, I think part of the reaction was, well, if you don't have the budget for the big platform, here's some free platforms you can use. And I think what's missing there is that resources go beyond budget. It's not just money. It's personnel. It's personnel with the right skill set. There's a lot that goes into resources that goes beyond money. So just saying, well, just hook up with a free platform doesn't solve all the resources problems that there are.
It's a really good point, because I think that I had this discussion about something that wasn't even related to the kind of content marketing world. It was a personal need, but it was like, sometimes there's a free option to do something, but the amount of time it takes you to actually manage and deal with the free thing is actually cost negative, because it takes longer than just paying a small amount and getting the whole thing, which was kind of the reason for the release. Is we were like, well, look, like on a cheaper basis, we can actually give you not just information, but we can lay it out in a way you can actually use it, or it can be customized to be how you can use it. It can be white labeled to match stuff. So like for agencies who are going into new business pitches and stuff, it's like sometimes what happens for a lot of folks is they have like all this information that'll come in for free on like a spreadsheet, or that they'll compile for free on a spreadsheet, but then they actually have to take all this time to make it look nice. And I was like, well, if you're paying, you don't want to pay $100 to have something, but you're willing to pay a graphic designer $75 an hour and they build you for 4 hours to turn this into something that looks nice. I'm like, so technically you paid more, but they don't think about it that way, right? So that was kind of why we were like, maybe we should have this conversation.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing is that a lot of people in small organizations kind of don't know where to start. So let's give them maybe 3 things they can do initially to get started and to show some progress.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that if this will go back to the kind of like how I think you should maybe get structured is, if you don't already have a list of targeted keywords, create one. And I would say that do this in a couple different ways. First, look at the keywords that are already driving traffic to your content. That's a great place to start, and you can get that from a variety of places, either free or paid. You can also come up with a list of targeted keywords, topics, and things from other ways. A couple ways would be, one, look at all of your feature names, product names, solutions names, whatever, and consider all those because you want to know when somebody's searching for them and like what content's matching up, obviously. Look at like competitor messaging and things like that. And then do what we call like a discovery board, and then see how people are talking about your industry on social or forums or like wherever, and take some of the phrases that you seem to hear a lot or see a lot and add those to the list, right? Because like that might be a good place to start with content creation. So I think that that's a good place to start. From there, go back and look and see what content that you already have that's actually mapping up with these keywords, and then what's actually ranking really well. So what's working? Can you take what's working on one medium and turn it into other things? And we talk about the medium, the method, and the message a lot. So like that's definitely something to go back and reference. But if like you've got a video that's performing really well for like one particular keyword or topic, consider taking the content of that video and turning it into a blog post and a slide share or like some ads or whatever, right? Because taking that content and turning it into other things, it's like, obviously this is a hot topic. Obviously you've already got some leverage with this. Obviously you're already doing well in the rankings with this. Like take that. So I guess maybe that's probably the biggest place to show progress and to start is to, you don't always have to invest in just creating brand new content. A lot of times you can invest in taking the content that you've already got and learning to leverage it across new mediums, new methods, or taking it and scaling the messaging. So one of the things that, we'll talk about doing is, okay, we see, a message is like a particular campaign topic is performing really well. Like maybe the email subject line got a lot of hits and maybe the blog post had a ton of traffic. Okay, is there more that can be talked about with this topic? Like, is this part of a series of topics like around something? Or is it like, are there different versions of this message we can test to see if we can actually like boost it up even harder? So I think that there's so much you can do with what you've already got to either improve its ranking or share it better or like recreate it into different things, that's going to probably show the most progress without the huge ton of effort on your end.
I just want to mention that you'll be talking about that in a lot greater depth at Content Marketing World next week. So be sure to catch Erin. Her session is building bridges to what?
It's like building bridges to like kind of learn to
whole title.
Yeah, they make the titles, and I was like, wow, this is like a really intense title. And so I think I put like on the second slide like what I would have called it, which is just like talking to your coworkers and like doing better data collection, which is what it really is, right? It's talking about how to actually take what other folks are doing within your organization, whether it's part of the marketing department or sales or customer service or whatever, and like leveraging that to do better marketing, and also taking your marketing data to help inform them to make better decisions as well. And I'll be getting kind of into a little bit more the nitty gritty of the medium, the method, and the message thing that we talk about a lot.
So we'll look forward to seeing you there. And unless you have something else, I think that's all for this week. In 2 weeks, we're going to be starting a new series about SEO trends and best practices. and some tips and hacks to get your brand found online now and in the future. So if you have some specific questions or comments around that subject, we'd really love to hear them, and we'll integrate them into the show. You can always email Erin at ginzametrics.com or me, Karen at ginzametrics.com, and we'll get back to you with any questions or concerns you have. And you can be part of our conversation on Twitter at #FoundFriday. So Erin, until then, I think that's all for today.
Sounds good. I'll see you in 2 weeks.
All right, and have a good holiday weekend, everyone.
Thanks. Bye, Karen.
Bye-bye.